All right, good afternoon and welcome to this week's GEMA VIEW Virtual Industry Talk focused on production and development. These weekly virtual talks are sponsored by the Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance and the Cawley Career Center. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to connect virtually with fellow Hoyas for this industry-specific discussion. I'm Justin Spence, Associate Director of Regional Alliances at Georgetown, and I'll be facilitating today's virtual talk. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few tips and reminders. This event, as you can see, is being held via Zoom meeting and each participant has been muted upon entry. Please keep yourselves muted during the panel discussion to cut down on background noise and any disruptions. The panelists will take questions at the end of this discussion. Please send in your questions as you have them using the chat function on the Zoom control panel. If you're having any technical difficulties, please send those in via the chat function as well and we'll be sure to help you. Without any further ado, I'm pleased to turn things over to Raquel Braun.
Thanks, Justin. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning if you're on the West Coast, afternoon if you're on the East or anywhere in between. Really excited for today's panel. I think a lot of you have seen me already. We did a legal one a couple of weeks ago, and no offense to all my lawyer friends or myself since I'm a lawyer, at least for one more week. I'm definitely way more excited about this panel. Our speakers have some really, really cool jobs, and I've been doing a lot of GEMA events for the last 15 years, and it's really cool to see people with these creative jobs that came out of Georgetown, and they're totally killing it. So thank you in advance to our speakers for joining us today. So we will kick things off with some intros. We'll start with Gabrielle. Why don't you just give the group a quick kind of background. What do you do now? What was your Georgetown year? And then we'll go from there.
Sure. Hi, I'm Gabrielle, or Gabby. I went to Georgetown and graduated class of 2014. And Georgetown was my dream school from when I was 9. I thought I was going to go into politics, and ultimately I did not. I'm in entertainment. I'm from Redondo Beach, which is a suburb outside Los Angeles, and I currently work at ABC Studios, which is a division of Walt Disney Television. I'm a manager in drama development.
Awesome. Matteo?
Hello, everyone. My name is Matteo Gomez. I am class of 2011. Congrats to the new graduates, by the way. I was a double major in government and history. Like Gabby, I too thought that I would go into politics and quickly became disillusioned with that and somehow found my way into entertainment. And currently I work as a story analyst at Netflix in the International Original Film Department.
Nice. Daniel?
I'm Daniel. I graduated class of 2015. Also thought I was going to go into politics and did not do that. But I work now for HBO for the show Real Sports with Bryant, Gumbel, which is a monthly documentary style show that kind of looks at the nexus of sport and society.
Awesome. So we'll get to your current jobs in a little bit, but I want to talk about career paths. And you all started on one path when you started at Georgetown. I have a feeling that's a very common path, having had many family members go through Georgetown undergrad. So talk to me about, and we can kind of go through the same order, actually we'll go in reverse order, so we'll start with you, Daniel. But talk about kind of your time at Georgetown, kind of your moment where you realized, okay, maybe politics wasn't what you wanted to do, and kind of what led you, like what your path was like to get to your current job.
Sure. So yeah, I was at the School of Foreign Service, and I always had this idea that I wanted to work internationally. So I initially thought that would kind of manifest in diplomacy. And then, yeah, at Georgetown, just being in DC, I call it the land of 10,000 class presidents. I realized just the ego and politics, it just wasn't for me. And so basically, yeah, I started angling towards wanting to do international journalism, and the resources were there at Georgetown to begin to do that. It was a lot of the same skills I was developing, and that kind of led me to do a year grad program at Columbia for the journalism school, and I kind of leveraged that into documentary, which is kind of where I am now.
Awesome. I have a few follow-up questions on that, but we'll go to Matteo for now.
Yeah, so what I did was I don't know if there was like a moment of disillusionment with politics, but I guess I sort of kind of got bored and was noticing like there were kids in my gov classes wearing suits to class. I'm like, wow, they're way more passionate about this than I am. But I had always grown up just being in love with the cinema. My family's Italian, and my dad would have me watch like Fellini films and Francis Ford films and Scorsese films when I was like a toddler. So that was something I was always really excited about. So I thought, why not try this? And I first came out to LA in 2011, and just by cold calling an agent at ICM, his name is Eddie Ablons. He's a big talent agent that I found through GEMA. He told me, he's like, I never do this, but I caught him on a good day when he was in a good mood. And he's like, yeah, I'll just give me your resume and I'll get you a job here. And I was like, okay, cool. And I ended up in the mailroom at ICM, which was you're sending around mail. But it's a great way to, as unglamorous as that sounds, it's a great way to just get the lay of the land and meet a lot of people and learn quickly. So I did that for a bit, and then I worked at some intense agents' desks for a bit, and then I went to a lit agency and kind of fell in love with story and realized I wanted to be on the other side of the desk in more of a creative capacity. So from there, I started writing heavily, and then was able to get into film school at NYU, went back to New York, got an MFA in dramatic writing at Tisch, NYU's film program. And then since then I've come back to LA, and I've started working about a year and change ago with Netflix, where basically I am an analyst of story while I write on the side with the time I have. So it's been kind of a winding back and forth route for me. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know a little bit of Gabby's story. And so I think for all the students on here, you'll see all of these stories are really different. So something for everybody to keep in mind kind of as you process all the information you're getting. Gabby, your turn.
So I loved politics. I really loved Georgetown and did a bunch of political internships and loved all the experiences, but couldn't really pinpoint, when I look at the people I was interning for, like, oh, I want to do their job. This is what I want to do for 10 years, 15 years. Oh, I couldn't find my exact niche. And meanwhile, I was watching a ton of TV, way more than what was healthy. I was getting my roommates into parenthood. I was reading Deadline, which is an entertainment news site. And I came home one summer, I did a political internship, and I did an entertainment one. And the entertainment one was entertainment news. I was like, I'm not a journalist, but the energy hooked me. And from there, I explored entertainment communications and publicity, and interned at Paramount and really liked it. But again, was wanting to be closer to the material. And it was through talking to alums like Raquel that I realized, oh, this is, I like this part of their job. I don't like this part. Like, maybe I should go this way. So when I graduated, I, reintroduced myself to a lot of alums and met more alums, and ended up talking to Raquel, who I was interviewing at agencies. I told her, here's what I'm doing, here's what I want to do. She introduced me to someone who ended up knowing someone that needed an assistant. And so I ended up working at DreamWorks Studios, assisting the CFO and COO, and again, loved it, but wanted to be closer to the material. By the time my bosses got scripts, it was like about to be greenlit. I was like, cool, but here are my notes. I want these notes to be implemented. So I worked for a writer-producer for a little over 2 years, and did development and production with him, and then came to ABC Studios as an assistant, and have seen a lot of changes here and have been able to grow as an executive at the studio.
Awesome. And it's so true. I think you learn, we've talked a lot about it over the last few weeks, about kind of how you get to know what your path will be like or what you want to do. And a big part of it is talking informational interviews and figuring out, maybe I don't want to do this, maybe I do want to do that. So Gabrielle, talking a little bit more about your current job and working in development, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are wondering, what in the world does that mean? What does the development team do? What do you personally do? So talk a little bit more about the department, the group as a whole, and then what your specific role is.
Yeah, so the company's gone through, a fair amount of changes through the Disney-Fox merger, which I think closed about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. So when I started in the department, we were just developing for broadcast networks like ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, and primarily ABC, because we are partners through the Walt Disney Company. And since I've been there, we now develop for cable and streaming, so places like Hulu and FX and Disney Plus and Freeform, and places outside of Disney, like Epix and Amazon. So what I do on a daily basis is I meet with writers, I hear their ideas, I get to know their passions. I think of, books that we may have acquired, or ideas that our producers have that may need a writer and that they could be a good fit for. I'm also reading books and, reading people's spec scripts and thinking, okay, is this a show? How can I make this a show? And talking to their agents and going out to pursue those materials. And then I'm working on current shows as well a little bit. So, our process goes from a writer's pitch all the way through the pilot, and then we hand it off to our current programming department. So I'm working on a project for ABC that's a pilot. I also, work on stuff for FX, for Disney Plus. So on a day-to-day basis, it's just kind of going between those projects and talking to the writers, producers, and giving notes on materials and seeing what they need. So our job is to help sell the projects and make sure they get on the air.
Awesome. Yeah, that Disney Fox merger was quite a bit of a discussion on the Disney side. Daniel, so I know talking about production, you've had a number of different roles in the production kind of cycle. And so you're currently, from what I understand, associate producer on the show. So can you talk a little bit about what it means to do your current job, and then some of the other jobs you've had in production, kind of along the production process, and kind of how they differ, and kind of how you broke into those roles?
Sure, yeah. So kind of, I work for a very small, very horizontal team of journalists. So we're all actively involved kind of end to end on production. So we're in a constant state of pitching, reporting out, developing stories. And then once those are greenlit, we plan these shoots, and then we go out into the field, and then we shoot them, and then come back home and put it all together into a documentary. And basically, I primarily am kind of helping with that reporting process and a lot of the logistic planning of the shoots and execution. And I guess, yeah, along the way, while I was at grad school, I was a freelancer a little bit. So I traveled to Greece to report on the refugee crisis. And I was kind of a smaller scale one-man band then, where I, shot, edited, and put together these news packages that got picked up at various news outlets. And I kind of leveraged that into the HBO job. But yeah, I mean, again, like where I worked was pretty horizontal. So like the second I've kind of had the same gig since I started at HBO, but you kind of get what you put into it. And so the opportunity has been there to kind of step up in various ways with this horizontal production process.
Cool. And one note for the group, if you guys have any questions, you don't have to save them for the end. You can just submit them through the chat function, and I have it open. So I can pepper student questions throughout as you guys have them, so you don't have to try to remember what you wanted to ask later on. Matteo, to you. So when I saw story analyst, I was like, what in the world is that? But it sounds cool. So tell us what it is. What is your day-to-day like?
Yeah.
What is kind of how do you fit in the process?
So Netflix's model is a little bit different from their competitors. They basically, to the extent that we have an insatiable appetite for story, they try to satiate it. They have people all over the world trying to get stories from all over the world, so that there truly is something in every language for every person. Their brand is basically just an unending appetite. The effect of that on the company is you have these very loosely connected executives. All my bosses are in London. So I just basically by email and video call when necessary. But they go out and get projects and bring them in, and they're so outward facing and so aggressive about just trying to cover ground that they don't quite have the time to really dig into material. So the most basic, like first level of what I do is any project they get from a producer, a writer, a director, whether it's A-list or someone they meet at a film festival, they bring it into me and I will read it and evaluate it and write a report to say if I think this is worth Netflix's time. If it's a book, I'll tell them like, is this more for television or for film? How would you adapt it? Try to forecast what the process would be. Like This is the strength of the material. This is where its true potential lies commercially. This is the part that's like not really well written and it's really needs to be overhauled. So it's just kind of forecasting the whole development process to make their job easier than it normally would be. I'm also a language specialist because my roots are Italian. I also speak Spanish by virtue of studying it at Georgetown and being married to a Bolivian woman. So I read a lot of material that's in Italian and Spanish also, in addition to English. So basically my day to day is I read usually a book and a handful of scripts per week and go through it and see like, is this worth Netflix's time? Should they develop it? How should they develop it? Film or TV, etc. A lot very deep dive, hands on the material that perhaps the executives don't want to get as in the weeds about.
Nice. So this is me talking about my Netflix favorites. So something like a Money Heist, which is an international, do you focus on like international markets and then how you bring them to make
so that Money Heist is like the gold standard of what they want to do for my department. So they'll bring in a project that they're really excited about, and I have to kind of help them like, how would we do this? And I'll use comps like something like Money Heist as like a example of like where to do. And also they'll look to see if there's like cross applicability, because you don't want to just make a Danish film that only people in Denmark are going to watch. You want it to be something that maybe people in the United States are like, oh, hey, this is cool. Like Headhunters would be like a good example of a movie that was like that. And then I'll also track, like once they bring something up and say, hey, we're doing this, I'll read various successive drafts of script to be like, is this moving in the right direction? If so, if not, why not? And try to furnish the producers with some sort of a game plan.
Awesome. So kind of going backwards a little bit, and one of the students asked the same question that I had previewed for the group earlier. So Daniel and Matteo, you both went to grad school. You did very different types of programs. But kind of given the current climate, I think it's an interesting conversation about grad school to begin with. So I think, Daniel, if I got this right, you went to grad school right out of college, where Matteo, you waited a few years. So Daniel, I want to start with you. You obviously, your focus is more journalism, documentary. So kind of going the journalism route makes sense kind of for your path and your story. What pushed you to go to grad school? Do you think, I'll ask a few questions, you can just layer it all together. What pushed you to go there? Do you think that's kind of what really helped you kind of take the next step with your career? And would you recommend for anybody interested in documentaries or journalism that grad school maybe is the route to go, especially in the current climate?
Yeah, so the thing with that, journalism school is this very specific and pragmatic thing, where in journalism, if you want to be a journalist, you just have to go do it. And so it was a good platform for me to just be a journalist, build a portfolio, and kind of learn from the best at the same time. And take it, especially because I was headed towards documentary storytelling, I was able to take advantage of the school's video infrastructure to just start like making stuff on my own. And so whereas, a business school is maybe where you go to make connections and take advantage of their career center, Jay's school was more specifically just like a way to build my portfolio. And so that's the approach I went into it with. It was only a year. I didn't quite think I had enough to show for myself out of Georgetown to be the type of journalist I wanted to. So it just made sense in that capacity. So, if you're thinking of going that route, especially now, again, it's a good platform to just start your journalism career. There's nothing stopping you from getting things published while you're at school. It's just a question of resources and network as well. So, again, journalism school doesn't have the same wealth of career offerings upon graduation that, a business school or law school might have. So you have to kind of go into it as this portfolio building setting. And so if you're comfortable, do that. If that's how you want to challenge yourself, then I recommend it.
Awesome, it's really helpful. Matteo, you kind of did a little different path. You worked for a few years, kind of got an idea of what you did and didn't like about kind of the world you were in, and then went to school and decided to get an MFA. So talk about kind of what while you were working, what was that kind of light bulb that was like, you know what, I think I need to go to grad school, kind of why you picked the MFA and how you feel like that's really helped you now?
Sure. So in all honesty, as a 20 something, like when I was 22, 23, I was still like, I don't really know what it is that I want. And so because I knew that I didn't know exactly what I wanted and where I thought my place was in the industry, I kept an open mind. And so once I got to a lit agency and I was working with writers and director clients, that's when I started to get most excited about my daily job. But I never had any kind of training or even just deep experience writing or doing anything creative. I was government history at Georgetown, so I was really good at research and reading things. That was like a big bedrock for me as far as my approach. But I just hadn't done it before. And I felt like being in the market and staying in the market out in LA would have interfered with like really finding your voice and really kind of getting this new education. So I thought it was a good idea to step away for a little bit and go to NYU, which has kind of a more independent mindset. And as far as the education goes, I consider that to be invaluable because you're basically in an incubator with other people trying to do the same thing who are from wildly different backgrounds. So you not only are you learning a great deal, but you're around some incredibly talented people. And so just it's like a healthy kind of nurturing competition that really pushes you. I don't think I could have self-educated how to write and how to really understand story just by being out here. But that is something that differs from person to person. There are some incredible writer-directors who just taught themselves. There are some incredible execs who just sort of grinded their way up. I don't think you need to, if you want to be a producer, I think the best way is to just produce, to just get your hands dirty. I don't think you need to go to school for that. But, and then as far as the outlook for the industry, it's not a bad idea to sort of take shelter in a master's program for a couple of years and build your resume and develop some skills that you might not be able to just on your own. But I thought I needed to work a little bit and have some life experience before going to film school. If I had just shown up as a 21-year-old, I don't think I would have gotten as much out of the education as if I had already kind of been in the industry and put my time in, so to speak.
It's really helpful. And something you touched on, and I think, you know, from a creative standpoint and kind of how you develop the skills, you guys both talked about it. You guys got some of those through grad school. Gabrielle, you got some of it from, I think, from your roles as an assistant and kind of just going right into working and going from the ground up. Talking about the assistant role, and I know a lot of people, I remember when I was getting out of college, a lot of people talk about just go be an assistant somewhere, or like Matteo, go work in the mailroom somewhere. And you always wonder like, okay, I think I understand what that means, but how in the world do you make the jump from assistant or mailroom to, I don't want to say real job, but like really doing the stuff, like whether it's really like working on the business or like really evaluating scripts or projects, like what is that jump actually like? How does it really work? So Gabby, if you want to start, and then kind of Matteo jump in about kind of what that role really means.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely scary. And when you're coming out of Georgetown, and, you know, I had friends who went into finance and were like an analyst, or, you know, people who became teachers who were just a teacher. So, you know, taking that assistant role was something I had to wrap my head around. But it's really great because you get to learn and you get to be involved in everything without having, you know, your name on the line. You know, at the end of the day, you're still in that apprenticeship type role. And I think when I entered the industry versus now, I think it's great that now there is a conversation about how we're paying assistants and how assistants are being treated. And I think that's really important to look at in terms of how much you're getting paid. There's a movement called Pay Up Hollywood, which is just looking at the cost of living in LA and New York, and, you know, how assistants are an integral part of the process and should be treated as such. But in the assistant role, you're on, you know, at least I was on all of my boss's calls. I would take notes on all the calls so I would remember things. So you're learning through osmosis. You know, I had access to reading all the scripts. When I worked for a writer producer, I gave him notes on every piece of material that would come in. I helped him break story. So you're really learning from these people who are established producers or established executives without, you know, your job being on the line in that capacity. You know, it's scheduling, it's calls, it's travel, it's not the most glamorous, but in terms of what you learn, you're learning a lot through osmosis, and you're also learning through the network you get. So your boss's network becomes your own if you make it so, if you really put in that effort. And I think I've learned so much from my colleagues and from other assistants that by the time I was promoted, it was great to have that foundation. And I'm still constantly learning. It's not like all of a sudden, I'm the top of my field or I'm like ready to go. It's always a learning process, and people appreciate and expect that. So that's great.
Awesome. Matteo, from your standpoint,
Yeah.
kind of that mailroom transition.
Yeah, just to riff off what Gabby said, really, as well educated as you are coming out of Georgetown, there's really nothing to prepare you for what it is here. Because one is an intellectual education, the other is there is some intellectual component, but times where it's really just about pragmatism and a dynamism that you don't really get from an in-class education. So you do need to just sort of be an apprentice. And it's a little frustrating when you start out because you're like, why did I go to Georgetown to push a mail cart? Or, you'll be rolling calls and you'll get heckled for dropping a call. And it's like, if you're so smart, why can't you connect this one call to your boss? So that part is a little aggravating, but you're not doing it to be an admin assistant. You're being an apprentice to observe and to learn that second level. And once you're able to anticipate your boss's needs and your office's needs, that builds a foundation to be anticipating the needs of clients if you're representing clients or people that you're collaborating with outside of whatever company you work for. So there is a logic to it. It's an imperfect system, but I think it is necessary. You need an apprenticeship just to get a practical experience. And you just can't learn that in a class.
When it comes to the technical skills, so Matteo, you mentioned it, Daniel, you are on the production side of these projects and the show that you work on. When you got out of Georgetown or while you were in school, did you already know, did you take classes? Did you teach yourself? Like did you need to know the technical side of production? So, I think some people think big, like creative and writing, but there's also the very technical side to it. So how much of that did you know before going to your current job into grad school? Kind of much did you learn on the job?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, most of it was fostered in grad school. I became, proficient at shooting and editing when I was there. And right when I learned how to do that, I incorporated that into my process and started shooting and editing my own things. At Real Sports, I'm fortunate to work for, a larger media company. So we have access to professional shooters and professional editors, but I still shoot B-roll in the field. I still edit my own sequences. It's helpful, especially in journalism, to have these technical skills you can hang your hat on. I want to be able to shoot my own documentary in the future, for instance. So I'm always pushing myself to absorb as many technical skills as I can because they're ultimately storytelling devices. Like technical is almost a misleading word because it's a creative skill set. And so, yeah, I'm always kind of thinking about ways I can push that.
Awesome. Gabby, Matteo, did either of you have any kind of technical skills that you kind of developed while you were in school that maybe you thought would help you in your current jobs? Or is that really not something that people need to worry about when they're doing the types of roles that you guys currently have?
I don't think there were any technical skills. I did at my first job take a UCLA extension course in, I think, story analysis, just to drill down on how to read a script and how to give constructive feedback. And that was really helpful. But for me, it's just come from, I think all my skills have come from doing it over and over and learning from my past mistakes. So I've just read, a ton of books, a ton of scripts. And so I can identify, I can develop my taste. And I think that's the biggest thing as a creative exec is to be confident in your gut opinion and to have that taste to guide you. Because at the end of the day, I would love to learn more about production, about business affairs, and those are all really important parts of my job. But the main thing is reading a script, giving feedback, and being confident in your opinion.
Matteo, anything else to add on your part?
Yeah, I learned some technical skills in film school, but it wasn't really essential to what I do now. I did take also a UCLA extension course when I was out here as an assistant just in screenwriting. But then once I got to grad school, they do really drill you down in looking at a material, and part of it is trained from the theater. So really having like a strong dramatic structure and focusing on character and behavior and relationship, that kind of stuff I wasn't really conscious of prior. So that was drilled into me. And you also kind of learn it in a workshop environment when you're bringing in your own material, and it will get constructively and affectionately picked apart by the other writers in the room and the professor. Like I had a professor who wrote for Seinfeld, and he was a great mentor to me, but he would always just demolish you when you would come in and your writing was lazy. So you actually learn, again, by experience, by having it done to you, you kind of start to understand like the mechanics of story in a much more like visceral sense than if you're just sort of passively, watching a TV show on Netflix or going to the movies.
Yeah, and I would just add, even if you're not in a development or industry job right now, but you're interested in it, watch your favorite television shows, watch your mom or dad's favorite TV shows, and start to identify like what do you love about it and why it resonates with you. And there are hundreds of scripts online of acclaimed shows that are, there's a script database that you can just start to read and get a sense of like what devices they're using or what works and doesn't, so that you're immersing yourself in the medium already.
Super helpful. So we have a lot of questions about the role of agents, submitting pitches, how you submit projects. Are you evaluating projects that come through to you directly from agents? So I think all three of you, so you can kind of take the parts of this question that resonate with what you currently do or what you have done. But when it comes to new projects, do you have to have an agent to submit a project? Do you have to have an agent? Do you submit it through an agent? What is your advice there? Kind of what's your engagement with agents versus talent directly? And any advice, because it sounds like we have a number of people who do have, whether it's their own documentaries, their own scripts, things that they've worked on that they would love to know, how do I actually get this out there? Like everybody talks about reviewing them, but how do I do it? How do I get it in front of somebody? So maybe we start with Daniel, and then we'll kind of go through the three of you, just giving that practical advice on getting your stuff out there and seen.
In the documentary world, what really helps is to have filmed a few elements already, even if it's low production. Whether it's an interview with this dynamic character you really believe will make a good documentary. If it's a scene that's essential to the documentary, it's helpful for people who do develop documentaries to see what they're working with, because it's, as with unscripted things, you don't have a source script document to work off of. It's a bit of a leap of faith. And so any body of evidence you can kind of bring to the table to show your documentary would have legs. Can help. I saw someone asked about being a presenter potentially. Same deal, right? It's film yourself doing a stand-up, film yourself in an interview setting. Just get access to whatever camera you can and shoot, because you have to ultimately show someone something.
On the script side, I'd say it's changed. There was the Writers Guild and the agencies have had a disagreement for the past year, I think. So, beforehand, most of our things have to come through an agent just because we're the Walt Disney Company and just in terms of legally. Because some writers do not have agents at the moment because of the Writers Guild and agency organization disagreement. It is, if we have a relationship with the writer and they don't have an agent, we can read their material. But I'd say for the most part, what I read comes through agents that I trust or managers. And how you get one is usually through working in the industry as an assistant, giving your material to writers who have agents or managers, having them pass it along. There's also a lot of competitions that agents and managers look at in terms of, the Austin Film Festival, Screencraft. So a lot of people enter those competitions to get reps. There's also the blacklist, which is another way that representatives notice writers. But I'd say we're mainly looking at material that do have that agency or manager representation.
Like
Yeah.
you just teed Matteo up pretty perfectly there.
For me, I think most of them, I would say 90% of what comes in comes actually from a producer. Netflix doesn't get a lot of submissions directly from representatives or agents. A lot of what they do is they have relationships with producers throughout Europe, throughout the United States, and also directly with talent. Like Antonio Banderas sent in a project that he was excited about to my boss, and then that got to me. It's also times when you go to a film festival and you network and they make connections. That's how a lot of submissions come in. So as far as needing an agent, I don't think it's necessarily like a gate that you have to pass through. One strategy also is to just work with people who are trying to become those executives at those companies and rise with them, because generally the people who are going to be strong in your network are not the people who are already established and above you. It's people who are your peers. So trying to build an organic growth and moving up with them is a smart way to do it. As far as for aspiring writers and directors, I would also recommend just making your own content and trying to build, I shouldn't use the word content, it should be story, because content is generic and content is TikTok, so forgive me. But try to build your own audience just by making something and putting it out there into the world. And that something could be a 2-minute short, it could be a teaser or a proof of concept for a larger piece. But when people see that kind of entrepreneurial spirit and that sense of community that you're already building, I think the market responds to that. It's hard to get people to read a 120-page screenplay from someone who, is not really established, he or she isn't established, because they already have clients who are working. They have a large client list of people who are already working, that there's just less risk for them to go out and try and monetize them. So I would try the route of just being an entrepreneur, building your own community, building your own audience, and going from there.
And Gabby, you mentioned the Blacklist. Matteo, I think you work at the
Yes,
Blacklist.
I worked for them for.
Touch on what that is. I'm sure people are like, what does she mean?
Yeah,
There's a TV show called The Blacklist.
So there is an exec out here named Franklin Leonard who, a long time ago, he started a list of just the best unproduced screenplays. And every year he would poll people and they would just vote on the best unproduced screenplays. And that became the professional Blacklist. And it's a good way to collect stuff that should get made or should get sold, but isn't for some reason, because Hollywood is a very inefficient system. And then from that, he launched a company where anyone in the world can submit their material online. It would go, you pay a hosting fee, and then you pay a evaluation fee, and you purchase evaluations, and it would have gotten read by people like me. And if it scores highly, it can start trending and you can garner consideration. And the cool thing is people will put up their work who are already doing very well careers, and just because they want an anonymous set of opinions of notes on their material. Shia LaBeouf puts up his projects all the time just because he doesn't trust some executive telling him about his stories. He wants like somebody he doesn't know. And although I have a bit of a bone to pick with that, because the person who reads Shia LaBeouf's story only gets $40 for their work. So it's not like it's not really like a fair exchange. And that's part of the Pay Up Hollywood movement. But you can get your material read with this. It's not a perfect system, but if you write something fantastic in theory and you live in Alaska and you have no connections to the industry, you can go up on the website. It's going to cost a bit of money because you're going to have to buy evaluations and host it, but it can start garnering traction, and that could be a natural way to draw the interest of a manager. Usually it's going to be a manager, because the reps who sort of take bets on unestablished talent, emerging talent, tend to be more managers, because they have these really patient, nurturing, long-term relationships, whereas the agent's more about booking you work. So they come in once you've already been monetized, usually.
Yeah, and I'll say, I met with a writer last week who got his manager, and then he got his agent off of a Blacklist script he submitted when he was, a sophomore at USC. So again, that launched his career, and it does for so many. And I'd say, the role of how people can get into Hollywood, I think, is under evaluation. I think people are really looking at the role of gatekeepers in Hollywood right now. So I think this is all subject to change, but this is just the systems that have been established and that are underway right now. So look forward to it opening up to more people, but that's how it's been thus far.
So a couple questions I'm going to combine so that the three of you can answer them in your own way. So I know two of you are in LA, one of you is in New York. I don't know, other than Gabby, don't know where Dan and Matteo, where you guys grew up. But for people who are wondering, okay, I went to college in DC. Do I have to move to New York or LA? I will say in this world of Zoom, you don't have to move anywhere right now. But should things go back to some semblance of normal, do you feel like starting your career in New York or LA was critical to getting to where you are? And then kind of talking about where you are now, all three of you are kind of parts of really big companies, in different ways. What are kind of the best parts of your current job, and what are your biggest challenges, whether that has to do with being a part of a big company or, otherwise?
Great, I'll start. So, I work in New York. For my career specifically, it was super helpful. I wanted to do international journalism, and to do that and to be based in the U.S., you have to kind of be where the major news outlets are. Granted, a lot of them have equally robust situations in DC, a lot of the network news. So staying in DC is definitely an option. But I will say that with journalism specifically, there are a lot of great local opportunities, and local journalism is profoundly important and it's dying. And so there are a lot of TV stations, there are a lot of print outlets based everywhere in America that can use young talent. And so if for whatever reason you're inhibited in going to New York or LA, there's a lot of opportunity out there to do good journalism, no matter where you are.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, most of the ways I've gotten jobs or heard about jobs has been through my network, which has been LA based and through other assistants. I do have colleagues who work in New York or, Montana, but those generally have come when they've established themselves in their careers. I'm hopeful that changes because we're all on Zoom right now, so it doesn't really matter. But for the most part, all of my colleagues, also live in LA. It's a big meet and greet culture of meeting writers in person. Now that's shifting, obviously. But I'd say for development, LA and New York seem to be where it's at. And for scripted, particularly Los Angeles. Although there are producers in New York, for sure. It's just on a smaller basis. In terms of benefits, I'd say, I get to read scripts all day and read books and meet with writers and talk about their imagination and what they want to explore. So that's awesome. I didn't think that was a job when I was growing up, and I get to work with really creative people. And, I miss being in the office with my colleagues, but I'm so grateful to learn from them. In terms of downsides, I'd say it is being at a big corporation. Things just take time. Change takes time. And it's, there's a lot of layers to go through, but you can really have an impact on your department and your company if you have great leaders, which I do. So, at any big corporation, there are a ton of perks. Disneyland, free passes, and healthcare, but there's also the downsides of just how slow things can move at times.
Yeah, I think as far as the moving to New York or LA, as far as that goes, I think when you're starting out, it does really help to have boots on the ground because you really just need to meet people and build a community. But once you establish yourself, especially if it's something like writing or filmmaking, you can move to wherever if you don't want to stay in LA. I have two friends who they got tired of life here, and one's moving back home to Toronto and the other's moving back home to DC. And they're just doing everything by Zoom. I think COVID accelerated some industry trends that might have persisted another 5 years, if not for this. But when you're just starting out, it really does to be here in person, because you also feel that ambition and that hunger of other people, which drives you in a healthy way. So I think you can't substitute that with virtual interaction. Oh, and am I doing the pros and cons of Netflix also?
Sure. And then Daniel can jump in.
So pros is they're huge and they're trying to conquer the world. So that makes me feel fairly secure during a time where it's hard to feel secure and it's hard to have certainty. So I'm very grateful to that because they've done a lot to take care of me during this period and said, don't worry if you're not receiving any work, like we got you, you're fine. So I'm very, very grateful for that because the job market right now is really tough. Cons is because of how big they are, it's very, very, very loosely connected. So you don't get a lot of interaction with colleagues. And basically you have one common mission, which is to advance Netflix's interests. You get your tasks, you do your tasks, great, you get more tasks, but like there's not a lot of team building. It's just like work, move on, and that's it. But I really can't complain because I also, part of me is introverted and part of me likes to be alone. So I don't have a problem with just like getting my assignments, knocking them out, and then being like, okay, I'm done for the day. I can relax, especially now because you're not in an office and you can go to the beach or whatever.
Yeah, and so for HBO, I mean, yeah, again, just working for like a large company is great, especially for journalism, and where a lot of shows are kind of underfunded. We have this like great budget where we can, travel the world and tell the stories we want to tell. So it's taken me to like Everest, to Chechnya, to Fukushima, kind of all over the place. And so I'm really grateful for that. And we're not really beholden to ratings either, by virtue of being in a subscription model. We're really, the edict from on high is for us to just make the best stories we want to make. And so we don't have the anxiety that a lot of news shows have of like drawing viewers, which can lead to sensationalism and everything. So I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, and for cons, it's, again, we're technically now AT&T. It's a massive bureaucracy. It's hard to get a sense of kind of what role you play in that larger system. And, there's just like a bunch of bureaucracy that's incompatible with the, fast-paced nature of journalism. And so we're always trying to reckon with that. But yeah, ultimately, I don't have many complaints.
Couple more questions, combining a couple more. In terms of industry trends, where do the three of you kind of see kind of the industry going, your parts of the industry going? And we had a specific question for you, Matteo, when it comes to international and how, movies like Parasite and Roma, kind of the acclaim that films like that got, how you specifically think international film, kind of how that may impact kind of the path forward for more international films in the US. So maybe we'll kick it off with Matteo, and then Gabby and Daniel can jump in.
Yeah, I think it's just the globalness of the entertainment space is just, I don't even think we've hit our peak yet. You're now seeing trends of people being able, like, for example, there's a German TV show called Dark on Netflix. That's a sensation. And I never thought that would be a success, but people watch it all over the world. The same with Money Heist, even if you don't speak Spanish. So that is a beauty of the general corporate consolidation and then these growth of these like mega companies, is that it does truly connect the world as far as stories with audiences. I do think the future for Netflix from a strategic standpoint is in their international space, because eventually HBO and Disney are going to be able to eat away at their market share in the United States. But what Disney isn't doing and what HBO isn't, they're not making an Indian movie for people in India. They're not making a Brazilian TV show for people in Brazil. So I think that's Netflix's unique competitive advantage. Another trend, and this is one that kind of makes me sad because I love going to the movies in person, is the movie theaters are kind of on at the brink right now. And yesterday or 2 days ago, AMC Studios, which is one of the bigger movie chains, made a deal with Universal to shorten their theatrical window from 90 days to 17, which is basically 2.5 weekends. Puts incredible pressure on theaters to make the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time, which means you're going to see more tent poles, more mega blockbuster movies, and less small movies, less indies. And I think that gives another advantage to the streamers, which is, while that's good for me in a business sense, because it could potentially help Netflix, I am a little saddened by it because I think less movie going and a more narrow range of what kind of movie going you are. But there will still always be the art films and international films that are just prestige releases and incredible works of art that people will go to the theaters for. And that's not going to die. So the Parasite was about the happiest I've been in years as far as like watching a movie and having an in-theater experience. But yeah, you got to keep your eye on that, because I think movie going the actual practice of movie going is transforming right now, and it was accelerated by several years just from what happened in March.
Yeah, I agree with what Matteo said. Dark is one of my favorite shows. So is Elite, both on Netflix and both international. So those are shows that are being watched all over the world. What I've noticed is there is a push more towards streaming platforms. I think you're noticing with HBO Max, with Peacock, obviously Netflix, CBS All Access, and of course Disney Plus. All these major corporations now have streaming platforms, and I think we're going to see content migrating there. Disney Plus, announced a Beyonce movie that's coming out, I think tomorrow. They had Hamilton land on there earlier this month. So I think from a content standpoint, these streamers like Hulu and Disney Plus are becoming more prevalent. From a story standpoint, I think the genres are collapsing on themselves a little bit. One of my favorite shows last year was Russian Doll. It's a half hour. It's not really a comedy, it's a drama. But, if it's a half hour, it's considered a comedy. So I think we're seeing those lines of, can you make a half hour drama? Can you make an hour-long comedy of collapsing in on itself? And I think platforms are really interested in exploring that. And I think people are really interested in exploring authentic storytelling. And I think they want to work with people who have something to say. And I think that's leading towards more storytellers who are from underrepresented groups and who may not have ascended to co-executive producer level on a show and come up through the Hollywood system. I think more and more they're looking to people like Michaela Cole, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Issa Rae, all of whom came from, either playwriting or from posting videos online and then have created hit shows and empires. So I think there's more of a move towards those type of creators as well.
Yeah, and so, and I can really speak to journalism, I guess. The old guard of TV news has been kind of dying a slow, painful death for a while now. Kind of informed my decision to try and do something long form, because it is a boom time for kind of documentary style storytelling, which is really exciting. And you're seeing a lot of innovative multi-part docuseries now really being part of the national conversation. And so, for those who want to do unscripted storytelling, kind of that long form realm seems particularly fruitful and exciting. And I'm certainly trying to orient that way myself. And so, yeah, again, it's like everyone was saying, good stories kind of end up rising to the top, I think. And there's a lot of good stories to be told out there in the unscripted realm. So I think we'll continue to see a lot of good docs pop up here and there.
So we'll do one more question for each of you. Obviously, we have all students and recent grads on today. So what are your kind of final words of advice, kind of as everybody figuring out how to navigate this crazy COVID world, trying to figure out, do I go to grad school? How do I get an internship? Kind of all the things that you guys remember going through, and then you add on kind of the current circumstances. What advice would you give, kind of things that people should look to do before we leave today?
I would start.
Or Gabby, go, you start talking.
Sorry. I would just say, remember why you want to do this. I think this industry, like any industry, can be hard and tough. And obviously the situation, of the world right now is distressing. So I think remember why you want to go into this industry, whether it's from a production point or development or writing, and really find people who affirm that view and work with people, and collaborate with people who, are pushing you towards positive ends. I got my first 2 jobs actually out here through Georgetown connections. So I really used my Georgetown network. I would say, reach out to people who have jobs that you're interested in, ask them for informational interviews, Zoom coffees. Georgetown alums are generally willing to talk and share their experiences. And so I would say, don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to ask them, who else you should talk to or what fields they'd recommend, because I think it's really hard to know the various facets of this industry until you're in it. So use the network that exists from Georgetown through LinkedIn, through the alumni network, to really help answer those questions.
Zoom coffee. That's the first time I've heard somebody advise that, but it makes a lot of sense. Daniel, Matteo.
Yeah, I mean, I think just do your best to create, right? There's a lot of different ways to tell a story. Matteo earlier, recommended, making short stories, whatever. Try and use this time to think creatively. And, it's a bit of an opportunity, I think, to demonstrate how you can think differently and how you can tell a story during a time like this. So just create. It's reps really matter. I've, every time I write a script, I learn something new. And so just put yourself in a position to be creating and allow failure and again, like seek out those, who might be able to help you.
Yeah, I would just to add to that. I would imagine right now is a scary time to be trying to enter a job market, and my heart goes out to all of you who are listening. I would just say that because it's so chaotic and uncertain for everybody, less is expected of you. So don't feel pressure to be like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like why am I doing this? I think you have to be patient right now, and you have to have a sense of humor. But probably the single best thing you can do is just Georgetown teaches you to be a well-rounded, balanced person. And that's part of the beauty of a Jesuit education. When you come out here, you might feel pressure to kind of be narrowed into what you do for your work and to be pushed into a certain box, whether it's development, production, or whatever. Have something in your life other than your work that brings you joy and makes you happy and makes you fulfilled, because for a couple of years, you will get your butt kicked. And there will be days where it's like, what am I doing here? Should I just move back home? And that other thing whether it's, a social cause, a loved one, a friend, or like a hobby that you're really passionate about, that will give you balance. And you really need that to anchor yourself now more than ever.
I'd say that's some phenomenal advice for all three of you to end on. And the butt kicking lasts well more than a couple years. So
I'm still getting mine kicked every day, and
I am too. So that's some great advice. Matteo, Daniel, Gabby, thank you so much. This was really great, really inspiring. I think we might have missed a couple of questions. So Justin, I don't know if you keep track of all the questions, but we'll try to figure out which ones weren't answered, and we may shoot you an email so we could answer some of the remaining questions. But thank you guys so much. Thanks to everybody that joined today. I think we beat our record by far. So clearly it says a lot about our three speakers and what they're doing. And Justin, I don't know if you have any other logistics, but if not.
No, but thank you all for attending on behalf of GEMA and Georgetown. We do have another talk next Thursday on marketing and communications. If you're interested in that, please sign up and register. We'll send you a reminder next week as well. But thank you all for joining and participating in today's call.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day.
Be well.